Assalamu alaikum and peace be upon everyone. Today we have a segment called Interfaith Insights, and today we are beginning with this program. I have the pleasure of being with Rabbi Yonason Meadows, who is joining us. I really appreciate him joining us here. I just want to introduce him a little bit. So the point of Interfaith Insights is to get some knowledge about different faiths, to talk about how we are part of one human family, how we retain our differences, respect each other, get to know each other authentically and genuinely, and at the same time make space for change and for growth while acknowledging each other's differences and similarities. A little bit about Rabbi Yonason, who's joining us tonight. He was born in St. Louis, Missouri. I did not know that. Into a family of academics, teachers, and public servants. He grew up here in Milwaukee, and he received a BA in history from the University of Wisconsin in Madison. Then he continued his rabbinical education. He received 2 rabbinical ordinations, one from his yeshiva and one privately from his main rabbinical teacher. After that, Rabbi Meadows went on to get a master's in social work from Yeshiva University in New York. And then when he returned to his native Milwaukee, he continued clinical pastoral education. And after completing his residency in CPE, he pursued the path of becoming a clinical pastoral educator and now works also as a CP educator. And what an educator does is an educator works with people of all cultures and faiths to facilitate and help guide their learning process toward developing self-awareness and the skills necessary to be competent and to provide spiritual and emotional care for others. Welcome, Rabbi Meadows.
Assalamu alaikum, Imam Sameer. Wonderful to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. Thank you for joining us. So in this Interfaith Insights, I want to talk a little bit about few points, and I want to begin by inviting you to share a little bit about Jewish theology and belief, and what really is at the core of Jewish theology and belief.
So I think, as Sameer, as you and I have often spoken about, and I think is what will become very clear, is that Judaism and Islam have very similar understandings of how this world came into being and what this world is all about. So we believe that the Rabbon Kol Olamim, the Lord of all the worlds, the Borei Olam, the creator of the universe, created this universe and intended for humanity to come into this universe to receive the scriptures that he wanted us to have, and for all of us to be united together in order to bring about God's will in the universe and to make this universe a better resting place for his divine presence. And we draw close to God through prayer, through study of our holy texts, which were given to us by God, and by acts of kindness and of justice in the world. And this is very analogous to the 5 pillars of Islam and to the classic ideas of what God is all about and what theology is all about in Islam.
Absolutely. I think that what is central to Islam is also the text of the Quran. So the Holy Quran is central to the faith, and it is about receiving this text from God and preserving this text and honoring this text that we have. I think those are the similarities between Judaism and Islam. Tell me a little bit about the law and how does the Jewish law work and operate every day in a practicing Jewish person's life? How does a Jewish person who practices the law interact with it and understand it?
So one way I like to think about it is that one buzzword that everybody talks about right now is mindfulness. Is that, we're being called in 21st century America, we're being called upon to be to have more mindfulness and to have more intentionality. So Judaism and Islam both had this idea for hundreds, thousands of years before America thought they came up with it. So the idea is that God spoke to us through the holy text that we received, and we speak back to God through prayer but also by living a life in accordance with those holy texts, with the commandments that God has given us. And we imbue meaning into life by always thinking, a spiritual Jewish man or woman is always thinking, is this what God wants of me?
Mhm.
If I'm going to eat something, if I'm going to go to work today, if I'm going to try to help somebody, if I'm going to be honest on my taxes, it doesn't matter. There's no part of life that is outside of God's purview. And there's no separation of religion and state. That's a Christian idea. That's not a Jewish one. And we seek to fulfill God's will, which has been transmitted to us by our sages in an unbroken chain from teacher to student throughout the ages.
Certainly in Islam, the idea is that the Sharia, which is the law, which is practiced in each and every single aspect of Muslim life, from prayer, there is no separation between secular and religious. Everywhere and every place is existence, and that existence is related and comes from the creation of God. So we are to be aware of God's presence in Islam and be able to pray, to worship, to perform every single act in accordance with God's pleasure. And certainly there are parallels between Jewish and Muslim approaches to law. There's also some very rich history, especially in Al-Andalus in Spain, where Muslim and Jewish
Yes.
intellectual knowledge production was so vast and so great and lasted for a long time. There was science, there was medicine, biology, zoology. All these things were discovered in a place where Muslims and Jews were able to live together peacefully, side by side, and create this knowledge. So what are your thoughts or feelings about that period in history?
Al-Andalus was a golden age, and it was a golden age. It was a time of great wealth for the Muslims and for the Jews that lived there, but the wealth truly was in the spiritual and philosophical and scientific accomplishments of the Muslims and the Jews, who, may it be emphasized, spoke a common language. The Jews and the Muslims both prayed, composed poetry, sang, spoke together, conducted business in Arabic.
Mhm.
And so this common language and culture of two peoples both approaching God and trying to understand every aspect of the universe through the prism of these two very similar cultures. And this idea that unfortunately is so common in modern America, that somehow science and spirituality, science and religion are somehow antithetical, was completely unknown and completely not the case in Al-Andalus. That the greatest scientists were also some of the greatest holy men and spiritual people of the time, and vice versa.
Certainly, it is the tradition of hikmah or wisdom, which
Mhm.
speaks to this part of history and other parts of Muslim Jewish history, also in Baghdad, where knowledge was produced, wisdom was achieved, or people were on the path through the natural world, through the world of science and math and discovery, without the separation and the cubby holding that we have in the modern and the postmodern world. It really was a very general and very vast way of approaching knowledge and approaching sanctity and approaching this path toward wisdom and God, I think.
And let it be emphasized that Muslims and Jews were studying together, again, often in the same language.
Mhm.
And consciously, I was looking over to get today some discussions of common Muslim and Jewish religious and philosophical writings. And from the time of Al-Andalus, but also even before, um, the amount of crossover was enormous.
Yeah.
And the commonality and mutual respect of these two worlds. There's a famous Jewish saying that anybody who is imbued with wisdom, no matter who they are, if they're part of the Jewish people or not, is to be deemed a chacham, is to be deemed a wise man,
Mhm.
and that is the highest approbation, the highest compliment that we can bestow upon a person in our culture.
Absolutely. I think it's important in this postmodern world to go back to this type of history and to realize what it is that we have lost, not just what we have gained due to
Yes.
technology and science, but there are things that sadly we have lost in ourselves and parts of our history. That's true. There's also, I mean, coming to today, I think that there is so much going on in the world today. There's so many things that we can address through building these bridges, through acknowledging our common past, and also maintaining our differences. Uh, One thing I will share with you is that in a world, or especially in a world of spiritual care and pastoral care,
Mm,
where the majority or the default is not being Jewish or Muslim, it's being something else. And
hmm
the expectation of people is to be Christian. I'll give you one example. There was a Catholic hospital that I went to, and one of my cousins, she was in the hospital, she delivered a baby. We went there, and it was time for prayer. It was time for the evening Maghrib prayer. We asked for a place to pray, and we were told the chapel is right there, right?
Oh,
And when we said the chapel, we are not going to go to the
uh,
chapel to pray, there was a confusion because the
yeah,
person did not know how to respond
right.
to that. So in a world where, uh, not by any malicious intent, just generally, the expected default is that you are going to be Christian or some type of Christian, and you and I end up not being that type of Christian. How do we respond both to ourselves and to the other when we are put in that position?
So I think that that's a wonderful question, and I think that first we have to go within, and then we need to go outside. So, and in that order. So first we have to strengthen ourselves within our own spirituality, our own culture, our own way of being. That we need to really plumb the depths of our own Jewish and Muslim souls and to learn the Quran, to learn the Talmud, to learn fiqh, to learn halakha, sharia, to learn our traditions so that we become imbued and are really acting, especially unconsciously, out of the foundation of who we are and not of who others are. So that's the first step. The second step is that having that strong foundation, we then are much more free to interact with others in a strong, confident manner, to be able to appreciate the beauty of who other people are and to help others be comfortable and confident in who they are, and to be willing to enter into dialogue um, based upon authentic identity. But I think the most important thing that we can do is to really reach out and to network and to build bridges. And certainly between the Jewish and Islamic worlds, where we are already so close culturally and religiously, it is a crime that we do not do this more and are not availing ourselves of what God has created in, as a tremendous opportunity.
Absolutely. The importance of being going back to our own traditions, or realizing what our own faiths have told us, have taught us. How do we how do we become authentically ourselves as God has made us?
hmm
And in this world where everything is, where many things about spirituality are commercialized and kind of just sold to you without you expecting to look kind of in depth at what it means to belong to a certain group, where identity and a spectrum of identity is just given without any kind of deep and true analysis of who we are. I think it becomes difficult, right? And what you're
hmm
saying and what you're suggesting is countercultural, is against the grain
Yes,
of how people are behaving.
it's countercultural. At the same time, however, there is a deep hunger within even the outside American culture for authenticity and meaning.
Mm.
And people know it when they encounter it and when they feel it. And I learned a long time ago that I will be respected by the outside world, by the non-Jewish world, only when I am authentically Jewish. I am authentically at home in my own world. There's no other way. So to hold up this glass, this clean glass of water, this model of of something that is authentic and real and deep, and to really show people what does it mean to live um, flowing through a deep and authentic tradition.
Yes, that's a wonderful metaphor of a clean glass of water, of a shining mirror is another metaphor that is used in some Islamic traditions, of
Oh,
something that is
I
clean,
like that.
something that is reflective of the truth of the light, and is not obscured by the self, is not obscured by the contamination of the outside, and really works. And what you're suggesting really takes a great amount of spiritual time and energy and learning, and kind of going deeply into your own tradition with the knowledge and with the spirituality, right? It's about discovering and giving the time and the energy of discovering what your tradition really means and what it calls upon you to be. Yeah.
And it doesn't need to be big acts. In fact, it's probably the most meaningful sometimes through the seemingly small acts.
Yeah.
If you're going to do an act of kindness to someone, make sure that your children see that you're doing it as an act of sadaqah. You're doing it as an act of fealty fealty to God as a Muslim, as opposed to just being a nice guy. Because at the end of the day, anybody can be a nice person, but our lives are imbued with spirituality and meaning when we act as Muslims or as Jews to live out the potential and the reality of our traditions through everything that we do, not just what the Western world would call religious,
Yeah.
but in literally everything we do.
Absolutely. It's that's important. So that's the first part of our understanding, that we need to be authentic to who we are and discover. And then the second part is, how do we engage with the other? How do we present ourselves to the others who do not expect us to be other than the default? And when they discover that we're not, they respect us. Sometimes they don't understand what it is to be different, what it is to be a non-Christian. They might make
Mm-hmm.
space for it, but they might not give the proper time and attention to be able to discover and be really curious about what it is that you present and your belief presents. So how do we make that interaction one that is smoother and more harmonious?
So I think there's a concept in Judaism of sever panim yafas, which means um, to receive everyone with a cheerful countenance, a cheerful face. That we are always very conscious of when people know us and observe us. That is the vision they are getting of Islam or of Judaism. So to be very conscious of that role that we play out there. You don't need to be an imam or a rabbi. Anybody out there in today's America who is a conscious Muslim or Jew is representing their tradition. So I think to reach out to people with authentic kindness, the old pastoral care saying of humanity was created with 2 ears and 1 mouth, and that should be the proportion we use them, to listen to other people's experiences and be prepared to share our own as the two connect. And the critical thing is that we can only build bridges between people if we interact as authentic individuals. I know you because I know you as Sameer. I know you are an imam, you are a father, you are a chaplain, you are many, many things. But first and foremost, I know you as Sameer. You are my friend. You are not a caricature or a stereotype.
Mhm.
And you know me as Yonason. Um, we need to be willing to do that hard work of getting to know people of outside of our communities
Yeah.
as full-fledged real people.
Yeah. And that takes curiosity, that takes respect, that
Hmm.
takes understanding the other person, making space for them to be themselves. We do not live in a world that is better off being homogenous. We do not live in a world that is better off. Everyone has to belong to the same kind of ideology, or everyone has to know. We are different, and we respect and have curiosity about that difference. And when we find someone in that space, we give them that space and we accept them for their authentic behavior. That really is, I think, part of the message is to be respectful of who you are and also of the other person. And again, like you said, those bridges are built with friendship. Those bridges are built over time. Those relationships are merely not just um,
Hmm.
academic or on paper. They're authentic. And lastly, like you said, the importance of removing the caricature, of removing the stereotype, something you might have seen or heard, and then you're curious about that, and then you bring that up to your colleague or friend who's of a different religion, with respectfully, and you try to interact with them and remove any kind of negative or simplistic ideology that might be circulating about that person or their belief.
Absolutely. Um, However, it takes time, and um, and I think that it's important to have realistic expectations for how much time that process can take, and how much people are going to be willing to do it. Um, However, I believe, as I'm taught by my tradition, that what it means to be holy is that what God has given my people and has given me is to shine from the very core of my being outward, and that goodness and kindness is what should define me as a holy person, not first and foremost all of the ritual demands of my tradition, although those are important and those are many.
Hmm.
um, but that people should experience me and say, oh, that's what it means to be a religious Jew. What a kind person,
Yeah,
what a caring person.
absolutely. That should be received, and like you said, it takes time. It takes time. One last thing I wanted to ask you about, and we can reflect on, is what is going on in our nation today, right? We have the
Oh,
three, and every
oh,
time there's a different layer of crises. There's a different layer of anxiety, rage, anger, all these different emotional waves. With the COVID-19, with coronavirus, there was fear, and
hmm,
then with the economic changes and crises and collapse, there is anxiety about the future. And then finally, with the treatment that George Floyd and others who have been receiving through the institution of that institution that is supposed to protect and help the American citizen, it's rage now.
yeah.
So how can we, as our authentic selves, as people of our religion, and as those providing pastoral care, how can we uh, try to guide the public space, the public sphere, into a direction that is healthier and more expressive and a little bit less angry and more harmonious?
I think it's reaching out, reaching out, reaching out, acting with love, seeking to build bridges, seeking to engage other communities, um, and not pulling in, and building the walls around each of our communities higher and higher, but seeking to actually use this as an opportunity. We didn't wish any of this upon ourselves, but the thing is that, please God, let's take COVID as an example. Everybody wants the pandemic to end, and of course we want it to end. But at the same time, what a horrendous opportunity would have been lost if we have not changed as individuals and as a community
Mhm.
as a result of having gone through that experience. So how how is God calling each of us right now, right here, to change? And I think first and foremost, to learn from coronavirus. The coronavirus doesn't care who we are. it's attacking all of humanity. So God has called all of us to look less at what divides us and to look at what unites us. We are all humans under God. So I think first and foremost, again, as the communities that are far closer to each other than either one of us is to the Christian world, I think it is absolutely imperative. And I've seen this already starting, but it needs to happen more. How do we, as the Jewish world and the Muslim world, how do we reach out to each other as brothers and to help us through this time?
Absolutely. It's very important to be compassionate as kind and kind, as you said, and it's very important to learn. It would be a loss if we weren't able to change for the better. Absolutely. Thank you. Well, Rabbi, I'd like to thank you so much for your time this evening. I know you have a busy schedule, and thank you so much for participating, for being present, and sharing some of your opinions and thoughts about this process.
Thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure, Sameer. Um, may May Allah continue to give barakah to you, to your family, to all of your work on behalf of the Ummah, and everything should be blessed in everything that you are and everything that you do.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. Blessings and peace to you as well.
Amen. Thank you.